Hello, this is Claus Jensen presenting another Garry Kasparov game. I have once again chosen an old game from Kasparov's early career. He was in fact no more than 15 when this game was played back in 1978. And it may not be one of his very best efforts, but it's still a beautiful attacking game that I'm sure you'll enjoy watching. Kasparov is playing the white pieces and Palatnik is black, and the game starts e4, knight f6, the Alekhine's defense. Black is provoking white to advance his central pawns at an early stage, and black then hopes to be able to strike back in the center at a later time. e5, knight d5, d4, d6, knight f3, g6, bishop c4, knight b6, bishop b3, and now Palatnik plays a rare move. He plays a5 in this position. More normal was probably knight c6. Kasparov plays a4 and bishop g7. And against this system there are several possible continuations. Kasparov chooses the most aggressive one. He plays knight g5 here. And Palatnik obviously has to do something against the threat on f7, and a possibility for him was to play d5 here. But then black is very cramped, because white continues with moves like castle kingside and f4, and black is having difficulties creating counterplay on the queen side, because both b5 and c5 squares are now controlled by white. So d5 is probably not that good, and Palatnik chose e6 instead. Then came f4, d takes e5, and f takes e5. And Kasparov doesn't mind opening the f file because it allows him to put additional pressure on f7 after having castle kingside. c5 came, and now Kasparov plays an inaccuracy according to himself. He castled kingside here. And why is this an inaccuracy? It is because it allows queen takes d4 check, and after queen takes, c takes, rook takes f7, bishop takes e5, rook f1, knight c6. There's no real pressure on the black position anymore. But Palatnik didn't play queen takes d4 with check. He castled kingside instead. Kasparov plays c3, and even though Palatnik didn't see this queen takes d4, I still think that white's position is a little overstretched, and his pieces are not being developed as harmoniously as we normally see in Kasparov's games. And satisfactory for black here would probably have been c takes d4, c takes d4, knight c6, knight f3, and then f6. This looks quite okay for black. But Palatnik plays knight c6 here, and this is in fact giving white some initiative. Knight e4 follows, eyeing both f6 and d6 squares, and also making space for bishop to g5. And now if c takes d4, then would follow bishop g5, queen d7, knight f6 check, bishop takes, and now there's no good defense against the mate on g7, queen to c1 to h6, and then g7. An idea could be to play h5 here, queen c1, planning queen h6, and then king h7, but then white has the strong move rook f3, and now he's planning rook to h3 followed by queen g5, and then there's a sack on h5 which could lead to a mate on either g7 or on h8. So this would be very dangerous for black. So instead Palatnik played knight d7, and now Kasparov plays bishop e3. He shows some maturity here because he doesn't hurry things. He consolidates the center and develops his pieces before making the assault on the black king. I think this shows great maturity from a 15-year-old. Knight e7 followed. He's planning either knight f5, knight d5 perhaps. But then came bishop g5. This is pinning the knight effectively to the queen. And c takes d4 and c takes d4. And then black simply has to do something about this white bishop on g5, because this is very annoying and a problem for black, as it helps controlling f6 and pins the knight on the e7 to the queen. So black is practically forced to chase it away from this h4 d8 diagonal. So what he does is play h6, bishop h4 and g5. And perhaps Kasparov considered bishop takes g5 here. But after h takes, queen h5, black has a very nice move. He can play knight takes e5. And if the d takes e5, queen d4 check, knight f2, queen takes b2, rook a3, queen takes e5, bishop c2, f5, queen takes g5. And now black has survived the white attack, and he has a healthy plus pawn in hand. So bishop takes g5 doesn't work for Kasparov. He simply plays bishop f2 instead. Knight g6, knight b c3, queen e7, protects the e6 pawn, so he can now play f5, a freeing move he would like to play in this position. Kasparov therefore plays bishop c2, and now f5 is not possible, because f5, then e takes f6 en passant, knight takes g5, h takes g5, and bishop takes g6, and white is winning a pawn and has the superior position. So b6 was played instead, and white Kasparov plays the bishop back to e3. This bishop has had a little tour on the king side, only to provoke weaknesses in front of the black king. Bishop a6, rook f2, and black still wants to play f5, and therefore removes his knight to h8. But actually I think that in this position before knight h8, this is probably the last chance for black to play the f5 freeing move. But of course, still after f5 and knight d6, black still has a very difficult game. But after knight h8, the problems are even bigger, because now comes a beautiful sack from Kasparov. He plays bishop takes g5 here. H takes g5, queen h5. And if Palatnik here had played f6, this would have led to another sack, knight takes g5. And now there are threats, mate threats on h7, and the only defense against them are rook f7, and then e takes f6, knight takes, and queen h4, planning rook e1 to apply pressure on e6, and the black position is surely collapsing sooner or later. So f6 is giving white a winning game, and Palatnik instead played f5. Knight takes g5, rook f7, probably the best defense, but now Kasparov has another beautiful sack. He plays bishop takes f5. And the idea is that e takes f5, knight d5 is giving white a winning attack with the help of the e pawn, because queen e8, obviously, let's have a look, obviously queen f8 doesn't work because of a queen a7 checkmate. But queen e8, knight c7, queen c8, e6. This pawn is now joining the attack and is well supported by the white pieces. Rook e7, queen a7 check, king f8, queen takes f5 check, knight f6, and white can win in many ways. He can take the rook on a8, he can give a check on h7, or he can play knight d5. Any of these options would win for white. So e takes f5 would lead to problems, and so does rook takes f5, as was played in the game, because then comes rook takes f5, e takes f5, and knight d5, and this second knight enters the attack, and after 2 piece sacks, the black king is without sufficient protection. Queen e8 follows, queen h7 check, king f8, queen takes f5, with check, king g8, queen h7 check, king f8, and now comes the very nice rook a3, because f1 square was not available, so he moves rook a3 instead, and the last Kasparov piece joins the attack, and rook c8, rook f3 check, knight f6. Kasparov has a crushing attack, and he could have played rook takes f6 here, I believe. Bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, bishop c4, and there's a mate in a few moves. Queen h6 check, king e7, knight d5 check, bishop takes d5, and queen d6 checkmate. But Kasparov played the safety move h3, and then came queen g6, and now comes this rook takes f6 check, bishop takes knight e6 check, king e8, and knight takes f6 check, and the black king is in fact checkmate, but of course Palatnik could give up his queen for the knight, but instead he decided to resign the game, and he was also about to lose on time, so in any way he was completely losing. And I hope you enjoyed this very good performance from the 15-year-old Kasparov, where he once again shows great combinatory skills and as well as patience and maturity like an adult. One can only be impressed by the way he plays the game at such a young age. I wish you all a happy new year. I hope you enjoyed this game, and I hope to see you on my blog at klausjensen.com. Bye bye for now.